Well, this is going to be a tough nut. This debate has not ceased over the passives versus the hardcore in the Tolkien fandom, and Perri Nemiroff, I think, is accidentally a pretty good representative of where we are because, as she will admit for herself, she's not too into Tolkien or even to the Jackson films. I want to quote herself to not distort her language, and I'm going to do the spoiler. She really liked Rings of Power. I think she only saw the first few episodes, so may have not been the best overview because she's just going from a limited perspective, but she did like it. So make of that what you will. And I think her reasoning was fine, but she did make a few problematic distinctions, which we will get to. But her own background is she's from Collider. She has her own YouTube channel. She's more of a horror person. That's her specialty. That will be important later. So that's where her perspective is from. I don't know what she feels towards fantasy in general. I do think she liked Game of Thrones, but I'd have to double check on that. So let's let her speak.
Like for you all to know where my reviews are coming from in terms of my connection to the source material and also to the other films. And, I like to do that especially in a case like this where I am well aware that this property has a massive and very, very dedicated fan base. So I have not read the books and I consider myself a more casual fan of the film. So that is where I'm coming from right here. And, it also feels well worth noting that I do know many out there are very, very passionate about this material, and I very much respect that. All I ask is that you respect this community here and also the folks involved in making the show for that matter. You don't have to like Rings of Power, and you can say as much in the comment section of this video. It really is all good. All I ask is that you do so respectfully. So now that that is taken care of.
Okay, so as she says, she doesn't really know the books. She's not all that into the films either, but she has seen the films and presumably liked them. I don't think she's very critical of them either. So that's her basis. She's sort of soft core with Tolkien and with Peter Jackson. And she was pretty overwhelmingly positive. Now you might think, well, shill media, access media. No, she can be harsh at times. Granted, she does try to be more positive than negative, but recently she did do some fairly negative reviews of Olivia Wilde and a few other things. So she is willing to be fairly negative, but more recently she has been positive. She really liked She-Hulk, which I thought was atrocious. She did not like Sandman. I thought it was a little bit better than she thought it was, but I also had a lot of criticisms of it. So now we'll hear her particular praise of the show and some of the characters.
Just to give you a strong sense of how Bronwyn feels to be juggling all of those things that I just listed. And of course, that makes them mean more. It makes you instantly believe in what she cares about and therefore makes you more invested in her goals. So her particular storyline I absolutely love, but it also gets a real nice boost from how strong Tyro Muhaffadin and Ismael Cruz Cordova are in their roles as well. Muhaffadin plays Bronwyn's son, Theo, and he just strikes a real nice balance between selling him as a kid who is in over his head and can make mistakes, but also as someone who is very capable and willing to go above and beyond, especially when it's for his mother. And Cordova just has such a
Well, I think she's been pretty vindicated because even people who hate the show do agree that Arondir has sort of stood out as one of the more consistent characters. Whether he's the best character, it's hard to say at this point. But I do like the approach they took with him to just make him very stoic, don't have him say a whole lot, let his actions speak louder than words, so to speak. And I think the relationship has been developed between him and Bronwyn and Theo fairly well. I don't even know if it's a romance or what will happen. It probably will be, but they've taken their time with setting the steps there. I do disagree that Theo, to me, is still a little bit annoying. He feels more like a plot contrivance, but I'm sure they're setting up stuff that will be a major twist. But now that we got the positive feelings out of the way, I do want to be consistent, because if I'm going to be harsh towards European lore, Tolkien lore, and the other channels who are either positive or negative, they do sometimes get things wrong. They do make some massive mistakes sometimes. And if I'm going to be harsh towards them, I have to be consistent. And she made quite a massive mistake, which I think will not destroy her credibility, but will weaken it.
going right now. And the same goes for Dorn and Disa, played by Owain Arthur and Sophia Nambete. Tonally, the dwarf material leans more into the comedy than the other parts of the show. And While I don't think it works as well as when the Harfoot storyline does it, it is working well enough, and it has left me really eager to see what happens when the more, I guess I would call it playful behavior, the snappy banter starts to crack, and we get a better sense of what's really driving Doran and Disa forward. Also, I have to say, one part of that storyline that I think is coming through especially nicely right now is how Doran feels about his friendship with Elrond, particularly how much of Doran's life Elrond's missed out on. Clearly, there are a lot of different types of characters and lifestyles featured in the Rings of Power.
I think I counted about 4 times she called Durin Dorn, and I double checked this thing quite a few times. She definitely called Durin Dorn. In terms of the relevant criticism, I have not liked Durin as much as other people, but I do like the world building with the dwarves. Khazad-dûm does look amazing, and I do like the little Easter eggs they've set up with the dwarves. But if you know Tolkien, he thought the dwarves were Jewish and even based the language on Hebrew. I know Hebrew a little bit, but I'm not Jewish, so I don't know how accurate or pervasive Jewish culture is with the dwarves. I do notice that Christian symbolism is pretty strong, right? With the sea and the whale and the biblical references to the sun, things like that. That seems pretty strong, consistent. But the dwarves seem a little bit all over the place. But yeah, Elrond and Durin are fine. But she did get it wrong. That's not the way you say his name. I assume she saw Game of Thrones and probably thought Dorne, which is a place and a region, and mixed it up with Durin, a character, which is kind of strange because it's not character to character. She mixed up a place with a character. So there we are. I mean, maybe there is a character called Dorn. I'll double check. I don't think there is. So made a major mistake there, which, again, if we're going to be hardcore about details, and I am, if European lore or Nerdrotic are going to lie and just flub or get a quote wrong or text wrong just to prove their political point, I have to be consistent. That wasn't good. But I don't think it dampens her obvious point that this is a very big new world. They constructed it very well in her eyes and did justice to the cast and these range of plot lines. But again, she only saw the first couple episodes, but she was very confident it would be getting better and better. So it's a very ringing endorsement, but as you can see, it's not from someone who knows the lore at an in-depth level. And so there we are. So some of the passives have really, really dug this. Now, a lot of the other passives really hate this, but it's not clear what they're hating it for. So, that's where we stand. Certainly, a lot of the hardcore people hate this with passion, but as I've looked through their videos, they don't seem to know what they're talking about. So, make of it what you will. Some of the hardcore really love this for the lore, and some of the passives just love it for just the sheer spectacle and the character work. And that is where we stand with Rings of Power and the Tolkien fandom at this point.